Hello, everyone. In this lecture, I will be talking about various UX laws, and these laws are very important for interaction designer or like interface designer to use in any type of like interface design project. So you may be designing a website or you may be designing a mobile phone, a mobile app. It doesn't matter. These UX laws are in general, they are universal, and they can be applicable to most of the like interaction design project, interface design project, and so on. Okay, so these are the objectives that we want to achieve in this lecture. All right. So when it comes to UX law, these UX laws are well established by various researchers, and they were like well tested, well established, well tested, and these laws have been used in many like industry projects, research projects, and so on. They are very useful, and also they can be applicable to many types of interface projects, such as you may be designing a website, you may be designing a mobile application or smartwatch. It doesn't matter. These laws are in general, they are universal, and they are very useful for designing any type of user interface. All right. So the first law that I'm going to highlight here is like Fick's law. So you may have heard about like Fick's law before. Okay, Fick's law is like very popular, like very like well recognized like UX law in the area of human computer interaction. So the main idea of Fick's law is kind of like the time to acquire a target. A target is basically a digital object on your interface, design, or like on the screen, on your computer screen, right? So this target may be a button, or like maybe a drop down list, or maybe something clickable, or like maybe even important information, right? So for example, user wants to do some kind of action. Okay, they want to pick, or like they want to choose, they want to click on a particular like user control. For example, a button, right? Login button, right? So the time to reach out to this particular target, or like this particular digital object, is very much related to the distance. Distance is basically the distance between where the user is currently at, and also the position of the object, right? So um so you are kind of like, when you're designing a website, you want to put like a login button on the top right corner, right? So but let's say like your button is like very small, super small, and which is not visible, not noticeable, then it will make users kind of like difficult to find, or like to discover this button, because it is a pretty far from where user is currently at, maybe at the center of the page. So the distance is kind of like quite, you know, wide, quite far, and also at the same time, the size of the target, like the button size, is like pretty small, which is not huge enough, like it's not noticeable. Then it will make users kind of like you know, are difficult to be able to discover this object, and they cannot immediately do the action that they want to do, right? So this is like Fick's law, the theoretical point of view. This is kind of like what Fick's law has defined. So we will look into the example. So in Fick's laws, right, when we apply Fick's law, right, the time it takes for a user to engage, or like to do action with a particular object, right? So as I mentioned, right, you want to click on the login button, right? So the time that are like, that you are going to take this action is kind of like very much related to the distance and also the size of the object. So as I mentioned, right, okay, you are currently at the website, on the website, then you are looking for a particular action control, user control, like a button, login button. So this login button is like pretty important on the interface, but the position or the location of this button is very far from where user is currently at, right? So this is the distance and the size, right? This size is like pretty small, which is not like visible enough. Then it will make user take longer time to be able to do this action. In other words, user cannot do it immediately, right? So it is likely to make like some problems for users to be able to do this action, right? So theoretically, in other words, as the size of an object increases, right, the time to select it goes down. So you may see, you may have seen a lot of like objects like buttons or like drop down lists or search bars. They are kind of like pretty large. They are located at the very visible location of a particular interface, and they are easily they can be easily discovered by the user. So if user can see that kind of large objects, very obvious, very it stands out, a user can immediately do um the action. And also the size and the distance, right, it can also helps the users to make a a better decision or like a quick decision, right? And at the same time it supports the users uh accomplishment of the task, right? Okay, I want to search something. So the search box is kind of like pretty visible and large enough. I can quickly go and search on the search box, right? So this is the idea of the fixed law, right? So additionally, the time to select an object decreases as the distance that a user must move to select is like decreases. So basically it means that, so if the object is located near user within the reachable area, within the kind of like nearer area, and the size is large enough, user can quickly reach out to this particular object, right? So it basically means it will improve the chances of users to accomplish the task within a very short time without like any problem. Okay, so the smaller the opposite is like true as well, as mentioned here. The smaller and further away an object, your button for example, is like smaller, and also it is like pretty far from the user's you know area, then it will take more time for user to be able to hit the target, to reach the target, right? So this is like this diagram shows you like the logic or the concept of like fixed law here, right? If the like the size of the target, basically the width and also the distance, so it very much related to the total time that user is going to take to be able to hit the target here. So um in um in mobile phone, right, it is obvious in the mobile area. So when you think about the mobile area, right, so as mentioned in this like diagram, so this is like most accurate area. So this is kind of like when we have to use our like fingers to be able to touch the objects to do some actions, right? So these areas are like very like important. This is like most accurate. So we have similar experiences in our daily life in using like mobile interfaces, right? So these least accurate areas are like it's not very sensitive, like user has to do a lot of has to put a lot of effort to be able to reach or like hit these like corners, right? So this is pretty important. But your objects, your contents are like put in the like most accurate area, the user center, the accuracy, right? The sensitivity is there, which is really true. If you are basically using the mobile phone with like one hand, right? So in that kind of situation, like we can only like accurately hit the target, which is located in this like the middle area, right? So the color variation, right? The brighter the color is, the more accurate your interaction experience will become, right? So this is like what Fick's law has defined in terms of like interaction experience, where you put your digital objects and also the distance and like you know how quickly user can do the action to be able to hit the target. For example, like the text boxes, so they are pretty important. So the text boxes are large enough and they are very visible, and like and they are wide enough, like tall enough, then user can easily reach out to the area and then do the action, right? So we have like some experiences in some websites, like they offer, like they provide very small and like very narrow text boxes. In that kind of situation, when we type in here, like okay, we type a lot, like one long sentence, but in the end, right, it doesn't show you the complete sentence, right? Which is kind of like quite annoying. And also, if it is too small, it will be very hard for the users to type in, especially in the like very limited screen area, like mobile interfaces. So right here, like you can also see the submit button, right? So user will do the various actions here, like form filling, and then immediately they know what to do, like to do the like submit or like cancel, that you can do it here. So which is kind of like within a very reachable area, very close to like where user is currently at, like potentially from top to bottom, and you put it here, so immediately to the right, so user can hit the target here, the product here, like within a very short time. Another example is in the what do you call that, in the Amazon, right? So in the e-commerce website, browsing, searching, they're pretty important, right? So Amazon puts the search bars in the middle, and very easy to reach or like easy to hit the target. And as you can see here, right, the search box or like text box here is like pretty large, and it can like it can easily show what user has written here, right? So this is another example. And another local the application SCB. So the login is like very important for online banking, e-banking, right? To authenticate like who you are. Like without logging in, like you cannot do a lot of user actions. So which is why the login is like very important in terms of the size, the distance, and the color. They stand out, right? Which is why user will immediately know, okay, I haven't logged in into the system, so I need to do it, right? So this is pretty a good design in terms of like how they comply the fixed law here. Uh, Again, another example here, right? The text boxes here, and the like uh the next action what user has to do, right? So user will okay, the country code is like automatically selected, and you need to type the like the phone number, right? So this is pretty awesome. You will reduce the number of tasks that users have to do, right? So you are helping your users, like so you are kind of like reducing the burden of the users, to be able to accomplish the task, right? So all user has to do is like type in the phone number, then like immediately click on the continue. So within a very, very short time, user will be able to like accomplish and move to the next task, right? So this is like very effective and efficient in terms of how you lay out the user's control. The same thing here, right? The similar idea, but they have like they design it like in a very user-friendly way, and it is helping the user. Even for the checkbox here, some cases like checkboxes are like pretty small, but they are very large enough, very outstanding here. So very noticeable, right? User can easily find it. So this are like checkboxes like pretty important here. If it is too small, then it may not be easily you know visible for the user, because like if you don't check it, like you won't be able to move to the next like page or like next task. So the same area here. Okay, so these are like the summary of the Fick's law. Again, right? The summary of the Fick's law is basically as a designer, we are kind of like helping, accommodating for users to be able to use your system like very easily, effectively, and also like efficiently, because users want to do to they want to complete, they want to accomplish their task as quick as possible, right? So this is very, very important for users. So Fick's laws can really help um the users to be able to quickly do their work, to finish, to complete their task without like any problems. So this is kind of like a very important as well. The Fick's law can be applicable to like many interaction design ideas, like okay, so if you have a lot of user selection or like clickable action, for example, like you have two options. Users, they have like two options, like delete or cancel. It's kind of like if they are putting too close to each other, or they don't stand out, then user can accidentally do the unwanted like action, like delete the object, something like this. So where you place your object is like very, very important. So the very potential objects, okay, either you save or cancel, right? Okay, save is like preferable. Then you have to prioritize this save button like then the cancel button, right? Then the save button like must be standing out, otherwise user can accidentally click on the cancel button, right? So this is how you can design your interface by um, taking into account like what Fick's law has offered. Okay, another law is like Hicks law. So this is kind of like pretty important you know UX principle, UX law. Um you can apply like this law in like various interaction design projects. So the idea of like Hicks law is basically the time it takes, right, for users, the time user can take to make a decision, what to do, where to go, where to click, right, how to navigate, right? So that kind of like making decision for the users, right? So the overall time, the total time will be increased with the number and complexity of options that are available on the interface. For example, like okay, users kind of like you are offering menu, or like you are offering your interface provides kind of like different options for users to choose. But if you have like a lot of options and they are very complex, so it will take more time from the users to be able to make such a decision, where to click or like what to do or like how to navigate and so on, right? So what Hicks law suggests here is that as a designer, we need to minimize the choices. One, response times are critical to increase decision time, right? So for example, like kind of like, okay, user is like going to close the window, and your interface, your window will ask whether they want to save, or like you want to cancel, or you want to delete, or you want to cancel, that kind of like action. Okay, so user is closing, like it's kind of like the time is ticking, right? User is rushing. So in that kind of situation, the time is critical, right? So if you're providing a lot of options to the users, it will make users confused, and it is very likely that user can choose the unwanted like actions. So the accidents, like okay, accidentally they click on, like don't save, or like cancel, and so on, right? So reducing the options that you are giving to your user is like very important. We need to maximize it, right? And also, again, right, you are already familiar with like cognitive like load. So if you have like very so many options on the interface, especially for the menu, right? So your menu design, your navigation design, and also your taxonomy. Taxonomy is the name of the category, which is very important. So if you're providing too many options, like too many submenus to the users, it will increase the user's cognitive complexity, right? So so user may get lost, like they don't know how to do and where to go and so on. And in some cases, like this is very true for like the website today. So you want to highlight some important information, or like important contents, or like important like user actions. So highlighting recommended options option is like very, very important. So if you're highlighting everything, then it will be very confusing for the users. For example, in the e-commerce website, so you may have like promotion item, you may have like special price, and so on. You may have like new arrival and so on, right? So you want to highlight some recommended options, right? Okay, one example is like, okay, whether you want to the subscription, right? You want to subscribe as a free user, freemium, or like you want to subscribe it, like you want to pay for it. So which one you recommend? So the companies, right, the organizations, they are likely to highlight on the like paid version to subscribe it. Then how you're going to highlight it, right? So this is very, very true to like most of the interface design. Okay, so Hicks laws, like it is the principle, the fundamental principle for users to make decision, but it is also usable, important for how people perceive and process the user interface we create, right? So Hicks law can be applicable not only in the like providing options, but also it can be applicable to many like other areas of user interface design. For example, how you're going to organize your information. Okay, you have too many information. So which one is more important? What information you are going to prioritize? Then you have to decide it, right? So you put everything into one place and they are all important, equally important, then it will be very confusing like for users, right? User will get confused, like and they will get lost, like what to do. So the reaction time, the available options. So the same thing, this diagram will tell you about like how Hicks law will work. So connective load, right? The connective load is like very important for users, especially in human computer interaction or interaction design. So this is very much applicable in any user interaction design like ideas, right? So the as a designer, our ultimate goal is like to reduce the user's cognitive complexity, right? So for example, if your like interface is like too hard to understand, too many objects, they are not organized, they are not structured, very complex, right? So users connection will become very like complex, like they have to, they might have a hard time to interpret, like to try to understand your interface and what to do, where to click, what to choose, what information they need to put, and so on, right? So the connective load here is like very important for interaction design, especially when users are looking for important information, or like they are trying to do some kind of action on your interface, right? So theoretically, when engaging with a digital product, a service, a mobile app, like a website, a user must first learn how it works, right? Okay, this is very true for, like, first time user. We need to try to understand, we need to interpret, then kind of like we will make decision what to do, right? Then they will determine like how to find the information, what actions are available, and what to do, many other things, right? So understanding how to use the navigation or the menu, processing the page layout, how you organize the information on a particular website, choosing the UI controls elements, user input, they are all relevant to connective user connection. So in the connective loop, right, why this learning process is happening, the users, they must maintain focus on what they intended to do in the first place, right? So the first time users, like when they come to your, when they visit your website, or when they use your mobile phone, they have some kind of like user goals, like that they want to achieve. Okay, I want to order something, I want to purchase something, I want to apply for a job, and that kind of uh, users goal like in their mind. But before they do their action, they try to understand the information, the layout, the they need to do some kind of interpretation on an interface, right? So that was support users, you know, to accomplish their tasks. So it so much depend on how easy or how organized your interface is to use, right? Otherwise, it will be quite a challenge for users to accomplish their task. In the worst case scenarios, they may even like give up, okay, not to do anymore, and they leave your website. So user cognitive load, the cognitive complexity is very important, and which is like correlated to like how clean, how organized, how easy, how user friendly your website or your interface is. So this is very much related to Hicks law, as you can see here, right? So Hicks laws show you like exactly what we see on the like the physical, the hardware devices. So the digital devices, right? So in everyone, almost every one of us, um, has that kind of like experience. So using the remote controller. So there are so many options, and there are only a few options that we are dedicated to, right? So how to simplify it, and trying to understand all the various buttons and choices here. So it will make it will be you know a negative user experience to understand all the options. So what we need is basically only a few options here, right? So this is one of the example, not only in like physical objects that you, but also you can apply these ideas in any other interface design. So this is another example from the Facebook. So Facebook basically like offer like various options. Like it has 5 already, right? If in my opinion, right, from my own experience, like more than 5 is like too much already. So 5 is quite a lot, right? So but the good thing is like they don't have many like very long description, very short and easy to understand, right? So user, and the way they structure the interface is quite clean and quite organized, right? In kind of like top to bottom, and like the users selection like action is like clear enough, and like to be able to hit the target is like very within a very close area, and which is visible and large enough. So this is, in my opinion, like is a good and clean design. But if you have more than 5 options, then it is questionable whether user may want to do it. Like it might become overwhelming for users. So Higgs law is basically, it supports the kind of like reducing the complexity. But as a designer, we have to balance between simplicity and also the complexity, right? If you are going like too far in like, overly simplifying, right? Too simplifying, right? Too simple, then what might happen? It will become like kind of like uh you know, very simple and very boring, and like user may not get like enough or like strong or sufficient information from you because you oversimplify it, right? So this is the one possible potential issue when we think about Higgs law, right? Okay, Higgs law is a good law that we need to reduce the complexity, but uh, if we are trying to do overly simplify, then it might cause a confusion to the users as well, because it doesn't tell user what to do, what information they have, right? So so you have to be very careful about overly simplifying things. Like, so one common example of you know simplification versus like complexity in some cases, like we can use like iconography. We use different like icons using various metaphors that will tell you exactly what user can do, what options they have, right? So this is a pretty powerful, since like what 2.0, we have been using like various icons and like these metaphors, and user will exactly know like what they need to do. For example, like magnifying glass. So this is a search box, or like, okay, so the home light icon, it basically tell you, okay, this is, you can go back to the home page. Okay, this is like, we are very familiar with this, like messenger, you can chat with other people. It's kind of like search or like navigator. The heart shape basically tells you, I like it, I love it, and so on, right? And ideally, this is the user icon, right? User profile icon, and so on. So these like simple icons will tell user enough and strong information, and user can easily know what to do, what to choose, right? Okay, so I using icons, basically it has a lot of advantages, but we have another potential challenge, which is quite true. So creating a universal icons are very rare. Like, it's quite challenging, stuff. Like for the inexperienced users, like they, for example, are like elderly people, so they are not the like they are not very much familiar with the technology, so they may not know like what individual icons mean. So the universal icons are very rare. So which is why you have to be very careful when you design an icon, right? So what it tells to the users, like the meaning of the icon is like very important. So this is what we need to do. Okay, for example, Facebook, basically it reduce a lot of complexity, rather than like okay, so they use like very outstanding like the metaphors or visual icons with like some description, and user can like easily kind of like do the action, look for the information, and so on. So Higgs law, this is Higgs law. It is kind of like pretty important for interaction design, user interface design, user experience design, and so on. Okay, the next law that I'm going to talk about is talk about it's like Miller's law, right? So Miller's law is like very much applicable to like today's digital applications. It can be a website or mobile phone or like maybe like smartwatch and so on. So we are dealing with a lot of like the numbers, or in other words, a lot of like information, right? So some cases like we need to remember like the information, or we need to recall the information that we have, right? So what Miller's law are like defined here is the average person, the normal person can keep only like seven, the golden numbers, right? Seven items. For example, seven numbers in their working memory, the short-term memory. Okay, you are giving me like a series of numbers, and then I need to remember it. For example, the password, or like maybe like what do you call that? Telephone number, and so on. So in that kind of situation, user can immediately remember the like seven plus or minus two items, right? So to do the user's action. So the idea is kind of like uh, user cannot remember like very long list of numbers or a long list of information. So what we need to do is we need to break it down into like smaller pieces, or like we need to organize our content or information into smaller chunks, right? So if it has become like a smaller chunk, then user will become like, they can easily understand it. Like they can easily process, understand, and memorize easily. So which is very applicable to what do you call that? The um credit card numbers, which is super long. So in the like early days, like when we install a particular software to our computer, then we need to key in the registration number or registration code. It contains both numerical and alphabetical characters, which is like super annoying. Like it has a very long list of numbers and characters, and very confusing, not human readable. In such kind of like situation, if you don't break it down into smaller chunks or smaller pieces, then it will be very hard for the users to be able to process, understand, and memorize it, right? So, and the other thing is like we need to remember, like, we need to be very universal. So the short-term memory capacity, right? So how many numbers like we can remember in a very short time, it depends on the individual level, right? So some people can remember like a long list of numbers immediately, but some people they may not do it, because like short-term memory is like very quick. So the rule is like seven plus or minus is kind of like what a, a normal person can do. So what Miller's kind of like define here, like suggested here, is basically the chunking is like very important. You need to break it down, you need to chunk the contents into a more manageable way, right? So this is like pretty important. So it will help users like to memorize the thing, like to kind of like reduce their cognitive complexity and so on. So if you're putting like too many information, user can easily make mistake, right? So the preventing user from making mistake or error is like very important usability law, right? If you can recall the heuristic, Nelson's heuristic. So this is pretty important. So Miller's law can be applying here to reduce the potential errors from the users. So if you compare to like these two images here, of course, very easily we will be able to understand like which one is easier, right? So the chunking, if you break it into smaller chunks, they 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 have become very easy to understand, and it will be very easy for users to process it. In some cases, right? So again, like the auto completion, right? User doesn't need to do anything. Like you just provide the like some information that you can automatically detect, like country code, like the area code, and so on. So they are pretty important here in Miller's law. So the other thing is like passcode, right? So if you kind of like retrieve the passcode, it will be sent to your email. Then within a very short time, so the lifespan for like this kind of user action is like very limited. Sometimes it has like just only a few minutes, right? So within a few minutes, you need to bounce back to like two applications, your mobile phone and also your email. And like, within a very short time, you need to remember the 6 digits. This is kind of like very daunting, like overwhelming experience, right? If you are not the experienced user, you are likely to make mistake, right? So like here is kind of like a good design. You check all the like the individual numbers into like smaller boxes so that user can easily organize it. And if you put into one small text box, then it will be very difficult for the users to key in the numbers, right? And also the another thing you have to understand is that user doesn't need to jam or tap from one box to another. So once he or she completes one box, then automatically move to the next, and so on. This is like very, very important step for the designer to accommodate for the users. Okay, the next law is like Postel's law. Okay, Postel's law is basically the flexibility in in designing your interface, right? So it can be like your layout, it can be your system accepting the inputs from the users, right? So for example, your website is kind of like very compatible with like various browsers, for example, and your website can be viewed um, from various mobile devices, right? And it won't cause any like distortion or like confusion to the users, right? So it is very important to be flexible in terms of like how you you design your interface for users, especially for like users when they do the actions. You should not force users to do only one way of interacting with the system, but you should also offer various possibilities for users to be able to to interact with your system, right? So as a designer, by theory, you need to be very empathetic to your users, flexible, and your interface design should be tolerate enough for the users. For example, user may key in like okay, you only need to um for example like the accept the numbers, but user will key in the characters. You should not force them, but you need to control it, right? You need to control it. So, um, okay, one example here is kind of like um one web design which is kind of like compatible with various screen size, various tablets and devices, right? This is one action. So the other design idea is basically for the login, right? So you need to think about your users, like they can use various ways to log um into your system. For example, like other login information, you can use like Facebook, you can use like Google, you can use email, you can use username and password, and so on, right? So there are various options that you can offer to users to be able to do their user action, right? So this is kind of like bridging a gap between the human, the users, and the interface, the system, right? So user the communication, the interaction has become like very flexible, very friendly. Then the intimacy between like users and the interface will be very effective, very efficient, right? So, and also it will like take away, it will like take down all the buttons from the users. So there are like a lot of flexibilities for users to be able to accomplish like their user goals. There is not only one way. We have a lot of other ways to be able to go to their user's goal or user target. So the same thing for the menu. There should not be only one route for the users to be able to reach their destination. They may have other options to navigate through your interface to be able to hit their target, right? Okay, the next law is like pretty interesting, which is called aesthetic usability effect, right? So this is kind of like pretty like useful um usability law, UX law, uh that many people are nowadays they are emphasizing on. So users often perceive aesthetically or pleasing design as design that is more usable. So in other words, if your interface design is like the look and feel and the design is quite attractive, quite pleasing, aesthetically pleasant, right? So then user will see it, okay, this is a very cool design and like very soothing and very like attractive. Then they can ignore the small and minor usability issues of your system, right? Because your look and feel, the aesthetic part is like very pleasing, very attractive. So this theory is basically your interface may have like small um or minor usability issues, but if your system is like pretty enough, like good enough, attractive enough, so user can easily ignore those minor issues. But I don't it doesn't mean that if you have a major flaw in UX UI, then it won't help. But the small minor details can be ignored by covering up the like aesthetically pleasing designs. So if you look into like today's website like application, they are very like very much focusing on the aesthetic aspect of your interface design, color choices, icons, design, layout, responsiveness, interactivity. So they are very like attractive and very the very pleasant, right? So you can see the Apple's products, right? So they are very attractive, like everyone knows, like the Apple's products are very cool and very pleasant and very um attractive. So it doesn't mean that Apple products they don't have any usability issues. They may have some minor issues, but they can be easily covered by their aesthetic and pretty cool design, right? So this is like what one case study, and the other product as well, like mobile devices and like the games and so on, right? So especially in games, digital games, right? So yeah, of course they have like usability issues, but the game is like the graphic, the sound, the interactivity, they are very pleasing, aesthetically pleasing and very attractive. Then you can easily ignore all these minor things, right? So this is one thing that we can learn from aesthetic usability effect. Okay, the next law is like Tesla's law. Tesla's law is basically um the and another important one, but don't be confused with like Higgs law. Okay, Higgs law is basically they tell you about it tells you about the reducing the complexity. But Tesla law is basically okay, every interface or like every or like website or mobile app we have like, we need to maintain a certain level of complexity. We cannot reduce it. We still need to maintain it because like doing user actions. So there are some very complex like the interaction or like the task sequence. Um so this is like very important for the users, right? So how to maintain all the important steps. For example, e-commerce, right? E-commerce basically user will browse the item, they will view the detail page, then check out payment. So this is the very basic task flow that you cannot reduce it, right? You cannot remove one of the tasks. Then it will be very like incomplete. It will become incomplete task and very risky for the the system and also for the users as well. So Tesla's law is basically like we need to maintain the certain level of complexity, right? So all processes have a core of like complexity that cannot be taken away or like designed away. And we need to assume by either the system or the users, right? But we need to make sure that like as much as possible, we need to lift off the burden from the user. Okay, we will include all the tasks, but how to make sure that we will reduce the level of complexity as much as possible, and also we will help the users. The system will help the users. So the key concept here is like, for the designer to reduce complexity for the users that use the products or services we build, but there is some inherent complexity in every process, as I mentioned, right? Withdrawing money, submitting your assignment, food order, and so on. For if you see like, the email like system, like okay, so there are like a sequence of tasks that we need to accomplish here. So we cannot reduce any of it, right? Otherwise, your user task will become incomplete. So one simplicity tends to abstraction. So as I mentioned, right? So I have already talked about this. You know, as a designer, we love the simplicity, right? So the minimalist design, but it doesn't mean that we have to reduce a lot of complexity, right? So we have to balance like between these trade-off. So I have already mentioned about using iconography is like very important, but we have to be very careful about what individual icons mean. Does like, everyone understand it or majority understand it? Okay, the next law is like duality threshold, like UX law. So which is very relatable to every one of us. Like we have like so much experiences in using various devices, various applications, right? But the loading time, the performance time, the response time is like it's taking too long. No one will be able to tolerate, right? So make sure your design, your interface must be responsive enough, right? So let's say, right, those big names, they're Google search or Facebook or Instagram. The loading time is like, super quick. Within a few seconds, like, they will respond it. So one good thing to otherwise like if you're kind of like user will do some action, then the system will be taking too long, then user will get lost, will lose their attention, or like even they may want to give it up, like not to continue or something like this. So the loading or the response time is like very or feedback is like very, very important. So how to prevent this problem? So one example here is like users kind of like they are like they show the kind of like the progress of like um or like preview of like what is happening behind. So this is very much applicable to the heuristic, like Nelson heuristic, the system status, right? User always want to know what is happening on the interface and what just happened to them, right? They want to clearly know that they do one action, the system will not respond to them in a very short time, then it will be very difficult for them to understand what is happening out there, right? So showing the preview or indicators or loading time is a very, very important. This is what this law has like suggested. We have to, the communication, right, should not be like, you know, should not be a gap, that it should not have a gap between user and the machine, right? So the communication, the interaction between the machine and the user should be continuous. So that kind of like design idea is like very common nowadays. Loading picture or like showing some kind of like progress bar, like, you know, something like the instruction indication, the feedback is like very, 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 very important here, right? So it will help users to understand what is happening on the interface as well. Okay, so these are the laws, like UX UI laws, like, you know, that we learn at least for this course, and we have learned a lot of like design principles and UX law, and that should be enough for designing your like final prototype in your project. All right, so these are like a few more like, you know, knowledge that how to apply psychological principles in design. So there are so many like design principles and UX law, but it doesn't mean that you need to apply all into your project, but you have to decide which one that you want to go with your project, what you will use in your project. This is very important. Okay, in the end, right, the human computer interaction is all about understanding humans behavior, their cognitive psychology, and so on, right? So that we will be able to create, you know, human center, user center like interfaces. So in your team, right, when you're designing your interfaces, how you do, right? So the visibility is very important. This is kind of like, you know, design approach that you can use in your project. So the visibility is very important. So it's very likely that, okay, we may or may not do it here, but you know, if you have a design team, you need to print out all these usability UX UI laws, principles, and put it on the, like, you know, wall or somewhere like that everyone can see it, right? So this is visibility is very important. And show and tell is basically you design some ideas, then you should show and tell, and you spread the knowledge, like information in the group, like, so, you know, so that you will be able to get agreement from your team members. And in the end, the design principles are very important, right? As I mentioned, all right, the, you know, we cannot apply all the UX laws in your project, but you have to come up with, like, you know, the design principles, how we are going to use, and what we are going to use in your project. So that kind of like maybe a card, or like maybe, you know, you may write down, you may create those like various cards and print it out and spread to the, like, distribute to the other people, so that every designer will know that what we are using, what we are, you know, applying in your project. Okay, so this is how you can, you know, define your principle here. So you need to identify the team, you need to align with your requirements, user needs, divergent thinking, convergent thinking, like that. I have already covered it before. And you need to refine again and again. And then finally, you need to circulate, advocate all the design principles here. So that's all for this lecture, and thank you so much, and I will see you next time.